The moment I realized something was wrong wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slammed doors, just a notification. A single message on my girlfriend's phone from someone whose name I had never heard before. And the worst part? She looked more scared of me seeing it than she looked surprised that it existed. That's when I started paying attention. Because if there's one thing I learned from this entire mess, it's this. People don't suddenly become cheaters. They slowly become strangers first. Before I get into the story, let me introduce myself. I'm Jason. I'm 31 years old. At the time this happened, I had been in a relationship for almost 4 years. Her name was Emily. And honestly, I thought we were solid. We weren't the kind of couple constantly posting photos online or pretending to be perfect. We were comfortable. Quiet movie nights. Sunday grocery runs. Arguments about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Normal relationship stuff. Nothing felt fake. Nothing felt fragile. Which is exactly why the first red flag was so easy to ignore. But looking back now, it was sign number one. Sign number one, sudden privacy with their phone. Emily never cared about her phone before. It would sit on the table during dinner. Sometimes she'd even ask me to read messages while she was cooking. Total transparency. Then one day that changed. Her phone suddenly became a classified government document, face down on every surface, always in her pocket, even when she went to the bathroom. At first I joked about it, planning to join the CIA or something. She laughed, but it wasn't a natural laugh. It was the kind of laugh people use when they hope humor will close the conversation. I told myself I was overthinking, until the second sign appeared. Sign number 2, schedule changes that don't add up. Emily worked a pretty standard marketing job, 9 to 5, occasional late meetings. Nothing unusual. But suddenly she started working late a lot, 3 nights a week, then 4. Sometimes she'd come home around 10 p.m. And here's where logic started bothering me. Because her company had just announced budget cuts, which meant fewer projects, not more. One night, I asked casually, "Busy season at work?" She nodded while taking off her shoes. "Yeah, big campaign coming up." That explanation should have made sense. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like a line memorized in advance. Still, I had no proof, just instinct. Then came sign number 3. Sign number 3, emotional distance. People think cheating is mostly physical. It's not. It starts emotionally. Emily stopped asking about my day, stopped sharing stories about hers. Our conversations turned into logistical updates. Did you feed the dog? Did you pay the electricity bill? That kind of thing. At night, she'd scroll on her phone while I watched TV, occasionally smiling at something on the screen, but never telling me what it was. That smile bothered me more than anything else, because it used to belong to me. Sign number 4, strange digital behavior. The real investigation started accidentally. One night, Emily fell asleep on the couch. Her phone buzzed. Normally, I wouldn't touch it, but the notification preview caught my eye. It said, "Miss you already," from a contact saved simply as A, not a full name, just a letter, which is usually the first mistake people make when trying to hide something. They think vague labels are clever. In reality, they're suspicious. I didn't open the message. Instead, I did something simpler. I looked at the timestamp. 11:43 p.m. Emily had supposedly been working late that night, at the office, with her big campaign. But someone was texting her, "Miss you already," and suddenly my brain started connecting dots. Sign number 5, overreaction when asked simple questions. The next evening, I asked the most innocent question possible. "Hey, Hooza?" Emily froze. Not dramatically, just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. Then she said, "Oh, just a coworker." Simple answer, except for one detail. Her company directory was public, and earlier that afternoon, I had already checked it. There was no employee with a name starting with A. That's when I knew something was happening. But knowing something is wrong and proving it are two very different things. So instead of confronting her immediately, I started observing patterns, Timelines, behavior, because lies always collapse under consistency checks. And within 2 weeks, the pattern became undeniable. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she worked late. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she received messages from A. And every Tuesday and Thursday, she came home smelling like the same unfamiliar cologne. At that point, my panic turned into something colder. Focus, because emotional reactions don't expose lies. Logic does. So I decided the next step wasn't an argument. It was a controlled confrontation. And what I discovered during that conversation was worse than cheating. It was a betrayal involving someone I had trusted for almost a decade. But that part of the story is where everything finally exploded. By the time I confronted Emily, I already knew 2 things. First, she was lying. Second, I wasn't ready for the truth. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just break your heart. It rewrites your entire understanding of the past. The confrontation happened on a Thursday night. Of course it did, because Thursdays had become her late work nights. Except that evening I left work early. Instead of going home, I drove past her office building. Her car wasn't there, which meant one of 2 things. Either she parked somewhere else, or she wasn't at work at all. I waited in the parking lot for about 20 minutes. Then I did something I had never done before in our entire relationship. I followed her location, not with spyware, just the share location feature we had enabled years ago when we were traveling. The map showed her phone about 15 minutes away, at a small wine bar downtown. So I drove there, and that's where the last illusion disappeared. Through the window, I saw Emily sitting at a table, across from a man. They were leaning close, laughing, the kind of relaxed laughter that only happens when 2 people are comfortable with each other. For a moment, I just sat in the car, tried to convince myself there was some innocent explanation. Coworker meeting, client dinner, anything. But then she reached across the table and touched his hand. And that was it. No more theories, just reality. I walked inside. Emily saw me first. Her face turned pale so quickly it looked almost unreal. The guy across from her turned around slowly, and the moment I saw his face, everything somehow got worse. Because I knew him. His name was Alex. We went to college together. He wasn't just a random guy. He was someone who had been in my apartment dozens of times. Someone who had shared beers with me during football games. Someone who once called me his best friend. And suddenly the letter A in her phone made perfect sense. I pulled out the chair at their table and sat down. No yelling, no drama, just quiet tension. Well, I said calmly, that explains a lot. Emily looked like she might faint. Alex tried to speak first. Jason, it's not what? I raised a hand. Please don't start with that sentence. Because there are very few phrases in the English language more insulting than "it's not what it looks like." I looked directly at Emily. How long? Silence. She stared at the table. Alex stared at the floor. The waiter approached and immediately sensed something was wrong. Everything okay here? Yeah, I said, just waiting for the truth. He walked away quickly. Finally, Emily spoke. 3 months. 3 months. 90 days. Roughly 12 Thursdays. Which meant every late meeting suddenly had a new meaning. I leaned back in chair. And the message is... Emily wiped tears from her eyes. I didn't know how to tell you. That answer almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. Liars always claim confusion. But confusion doesn't explain patterns. So I started breaking the lie apart. Let's review, I said calmly. Phone always face down. Late work nights. Secret contact saved as 1 letter. Location at this exact bar every Thursday. I looked at Alex. And somehow I'm supposed to believe this was spontaneous. Neither of them answered. Because logic is brutal. Once you expose the structure of a lie, there's nowhere left to hide. Finally, Alex spoke. It started after we ran into each other at the gym. Emily nodded slowly. 1 drink turned into another. Then another. Then another. Classic story. Boring, actually. Affairs are rarely creative. They're just selfish. I stood up. Well, Thanks for confirming everything. Emily grabbed my arm. Jason, please. I gently removed her hand. No, you don't get to beg now. I looked at both of them. You could have told me. That's the part people misunderstand about betrayal. It's not the cheating. It's the secrecy. The deliberate decision to turn someone into a fool. I paid for the wine on their table, because apparently I was still financing their dates. Then I walked out. 6 months later, Emily and Alex tried to turn their affair into a real relationship, which is ironic, because relationships built on betrayal usually collapse under the weight of mistrust. 3 months later, they broke up. According to mutual friends, they kept accusing each other of cheating. Funny how that works. Emily tried reaching out to me twice. Alex once. I ignored all 3 messages. Not out of revenge, just out of clarity. Because some people belong in your past a moment, they prove they can't be trusted with your future. Final thoughts. Looking back, the signs were obvious. Phone secrecy, strange schedules, emotional distance, defensive reactions. But when you love someone, your brain becomes very good at explaining away uncomfortable truths. So here's my question for you. If you saw those signs in your own relationship, would you investigate, or would you hope you were wrong? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy real relationship stories like this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because sometimes the most important lessons about trust come from watching someone else's mistakes. See you in the next story. What betrayal actually teaches you. There's one thing people always ask me when they hear this story. Do you regret confronting them? And the honest answer is no. Because the moment you realize someone is lying to you, the relationship you thought you had already doesn't exist anymore. You're just the last person who hasn't been informed yet. That's the strange thing about betrayal. It doesn't start the day you discover it. It starts the day someone decides your trust is something they can spend without asking. Looking back now, I don't hate Emily. And I definitely don't hate Alex. Hate would mean they still have power over my emotions. They don't. What I feel instead is something colder. Clarity. Because once you see how easily people can lie while smiling at you, you start paying attention to actions instead of words. And that lesson has actually made my life better. Stronger boundaries, less tolerance for excuses, and a much better radar for dishonesty. Ironically, the betrayal that destroyed my relationship also improved my understanding of people. So, if you're watching this and you recognize those same signs in your own relationship, don't ignore them. Not because every partner is cheating, but because the truth, whatever it is always better than living inside a lie someone else created. Anyway, that's my story. But now I'm curious about yours. Have you ever noticed signs like these before discovering the truth? Or have you ever been completely blindsided by betrayal? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy these real relationship stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Because sometimes the best way to understand human behavior is by hearing the stories people wish had never happened. I'll see you in the next one. One last thing. There's one detail about that night at the wine bar that I didn't mention earlier. When I walked out, I didn't look back. Not at Emily. Not at Alex. Not even through the window. At the time, it felt like the strongest thing I could do. But later I realized something interesting. It wasn't strength. It was closure. Because the moment you truly understand someone has chosen deception over honesty, there's nothing left to argue about. No debate. No explanation that will suddenly make it acceptable. Just a quiet realization that the version of them you trusted never actually existed. And strangely enough, that realization is freeing. It means the future is no longer tied to a lie. So if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember this. You're not losing the person you thought they were. You're losing the illusion. And illusions are surprisingly easy to replace with something real. Anyway, that's the full story. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think people who cheat deserve a second chance? Or once trust is broken, is it game over? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about relationship psychology and the strange things people do behind closed doors, make sure you like the video and subscribe. Because the next story I'm sharing might actually be even crazier than this one.